Welcome to the Lawyerist podcast, a series of conversations about law practice. Each week, we talk with legal entrepreneurs and innovators about building a successful law practice in today's challenging and constantly changing legal market. And now, here are your hosts.
Hi, I'm Sam Glover.
And I'm Stephanie Everett, and this is episode 262 of the Lawyerist podcast, part of the Legal Talk Network. Today, we're talking with Laura Briggs about how to be successful in hiring independent contractors.
Our brand new employee, Laura Briggs.
Yes, I'm super excited. She's the newest member of the team and is already kicking butt and taking names.
Yeah, and we hired an expert, so we put her right on the podcast. So we're excited to introduce you to her a few days after we got introduced to her. So
yeah. If today's podcast resonates with you and you haven't read the Small Firm Roadmap yet, you can get the first chapter right now for free at lawyerist.com/book.
Today's podcast is brought to you by Smith AI, Rankings.io, Text Expander, and Back Office Betties. We wouldn't be able to do this show without their support, so please stay tuned. We'll tell you more about them later on.
So today, Sam, I thought we should spend a minute talking about being strategic versus just doing things.
This feels like something we've talked about on and on and on, right?
Maybe, but I was just telling you that I've still had a couple of calls with people this week that just really highlighted this point for me that it's worth talking about again. So sometimes it takes a while for things to click and for people to hear.
Yeah, what was the call? I think listeners might be able to benefit from it too, and obviously don't name names. Nobody needs to feel bad for themselves.
No, it was good. So I was talking to a lawyer. He hired a web designer to redesign their site because it was time for an update and a fresh look. And he was like, hey, can you take a look at it? Give me your thoughts of what you're thinking. And maybe I might want to go a different direction and hire a new designer. So I was kind of asking for some thoughts on that. Mm-hmm. So, of course, I just said, great, happy to do that. What is the goal of your website? And that's when the blank stare over the call came in through. And he was like, I don't know. What do you mean? What's the goal of my website? And I was like, yeah, let's talk about that. Like, websites have goals too, right? Sometimes lawyers think of them as their electronic business cards. Sometimes they're there to actually attract and convert clients or be client portals or, right, there's lots of different things. And we talk about this on our site, on pages about websites, so you can go and check out. Mm-hmm. And so here was a great example of someone who actually had already paid someone to do work for them and redesign their site. And shame on the designer, by the way.
Right. That should be the first question.
Right. The first question is, how do you know how to design someone's site without asking them what the goal is? What are they trying to accomplish?
Yeah. I mean, I suppose there are lots of designers out there who are just building cookie cutter websites. Like, if you're paying less than $2,000, somebody is probably just plastering up a website for you without any thought. So I get that, just give me a website is a thing.
Sure, but that's not going to be effective. And I think that's where you and I are like, come on, we want people to stop and ask themselves, why am I doing this? And this is applicable, by the way, in so many things that we see lawyers doing where they're just out doing things. I'm going to run some Google AdWords. I'm going to get on Twitter. I'm going to be on LinkedIn or whatever the tactic is without really stopping and thinking, what am I trying to do? What's my goal? And am I doing it the right way and being strategic about it?
Yeah, I feel like people have heard me rant about this, but we still see posts in the Insider Facebook group where it's like, has anyone tried Twitter? Does it work? And I just want to bang my head against the wall because stop just doing things. Like, decide what you're trying to accomplish. Figure out what are the most likely tactics that will achieve that result for you, and then figure out how to do them well, and then give them a try and measure your results and, rinse and repeat. But yeah, this idea of does Google AdWords work is just it's a dumb question. If you find yourself asking that, say, hey, self, stop asking dumb questions. Like, will it work for me in light of the goals that I have is a better question, but starting from the premise of does AdWords work or does Twitter work or does Facebook work means you've done it wrong, right? Start from the question of what am I trying to do with my marketing? Who are the kind of people I'm trying to reach? Where are they going in the course of their client journey? And how can I intercept them along the way? Those are better questions to start with.
Yeah, and that's exactly what we're doing with this new accelerator course. So we've talked about it before, but I'm still getting some questions.
Ooh, nice way to slide that in.
I know, I love it. But it's relevant. And so what we do with that course is we teach you how to be strategic with your marketing by asking all of these questions. So the first couple of weeks, the course is designed for you to do the work. And so you jump in, and with my help and guidance, we walk you through the types of questions you should be asking yourself on the front end. And you'll see very quickly that the work we do in the first 3-4 weeks of the class are going to drive all of your marketing efforts, that come after. And you're going to be able to be strategic about it. You're going to be able to understand what it is you're trying to accomplish because you've asked the hard questions up front.
I saw a post in Facebook recently where Jennifer mentioned Accelerator, and someone responded like, "How much is it?" And it's $1,500, no secret. And she was like, "Well, that's half of my monthly revenue, and I have a side gig and stuff, and that doesn't make sense for me." And my thought was, no, that doesn't make sense for you. Like, that is not who Accelerator is for. Accelerator is for people who are wrestling with the question of, how do I make my marketing work for me, and are willing to put, where $1,500 is an affordable amount of money to get an answer to that question and other questions, like to come up with a whole plan for addressing your marketing and making it work for you. That's what Accelerator is. So
yeah, my hope is that if you were to generate just one additional client out of it, it would pay for that $1,500. But obviously, we're building a whole strategic marketing plan that's going to allow you to really be.
The goal is not one additional client, right? Like, that's not what it's built to do.
No, I was getting there. The goal is for you to then be able to have an entire strategic marketing plan that you're implementing that's going to teach you what resources, where you're spending your time and your money, so that you can start measuring ROI on all of your marketing activities. And really, you won't wonder anymore if you need to be on Twitter, or if Google ads are going to work for you, or what the goal of your website is. You're going to understand that you're going to be using your marketing dollars in a smart way, and ideally driving in a ton more of the right clients to your firm.
If metaphors work for you, it's an accelerator, right? Like, you're on the on-ramp, and you're only going 35, and at the end of Accelerator, you'll be cruising along on the highway with an awesome marketing plan that helps bring the clients in just regularly. So that's the goal. And if you're interested, by the way, is it lawyerist.com/accelerator? Yeah.
Yep. Yeah.
Very cool. So now we've got a brief sponsored conversation with Maddie Martin from Smith AI, and then my conversation with Laura.
Hi, I'm Maddie Martin, the head of growth and education for Smith AI. We are a virtual receptionist and web chat service serving small businesses across the U.S. and primarily law firms.
Welcome back, Maddie. You brought up an interesting angle on responsiveness to me, which is sort of the validating references, right? Mm-hmm. Many law firms still, their primary source of business, or at least a huge chunk, come through referrals. And you made the point that what if somebody refers to you as, hey, this is a great lawyer you should hire, and then they go to check your firm's essentially references online, or they pick up the phone and call you, or they try to use your chat box, and it's like shouting into the void. Say more about that disconnect, or that potential disconnect, and the importance of making sure that the referrer's experience and the new referrals experience are going to be similar.
Well, absolutely. I think the referrals are always the preferred source of new business because they probably are more qualified than just your general online traffic that doesn't know your firm as well. Mm-hmm. And frankly, they take less effort to win over as long as you're responsive, because what people are seeking out right now is to trust, but to verify, right? So legal services happen less frequently than meals. If someone tells you to go get a burger at this great restaurant down the street, they may have eaten there a week or two ago. But if someone tells you, if you're asking for, legal services, oh, I need a lawyer, and they tell you, oh, contact this law firm, that may have happened years ago.
Right.
So what we find is that it's really important for consumers to trust but verify. They are not only after a reference calling the law firm, but they're also checking online. And if you botch that experience by not picking up the phone right away, or not having chat on your website, or not being able to answer text messages because you're still running just the landline, then what we find is that trust erodes immediately, and that referral is discounted to the point where they're going to seek out other firms who can potentially serve them, because it's no fault of your friend, but maybe the service has changed is what they're thinking.
Yeah, essentially what you're trying to figure out is, are you still good?
Absolutely.
And this is against the backdrop of two things. One is where I think your friend may have gotten through the gauntlet of your potentially unresponsive intake line and then had a great experience after that they're now using as the source of this recommendation. But also, as you were pointing out, something like a third of potential clients feel a lot of urgency when they're looking for a lawyer. And that's probably what's driving, their decision based on responsiveness, which we've talked about before. But apparently only 15% of lawyers recognize that their clients are feeling urgency when they contact them. And what's that all about?
Well, that was the data from the Clio report from last year with their legal trends report. Basically, potential clients were saying that 33% of them feel a sense of urgency to hire a lawyer, but 15% sense the client's urgency to hire a lawyer from the law firm side, right? So when we think about motivating factors, just understanding where the client's coming from is one of the most important things that you can do, so that drives your behavior. And we saw in this year's report from Clio that it's not just about understanding the speed of the response is an important factor, but also the content. So if you just have someone who is answering the phone for you, then it's not quite enough. You need to equip them with basic answers as well, as long as it's within your wherewithal. So they're not going to be quoting out legal services or giving legal advice, of course, but the person who answers your phone, whether they're in-house or outsourced, or even an automated bot online on your website or through Facebook or a text message, you want to make sure that you're equipping whatever channel that is with information on the expected ability of the services you offer to match the practice area or the case or matter that the potential client's reaching out for, setting expectations for what it's going to take in terms of time and effort and money, and then what the next steps are if you charge for consultations, how to get those started, et cetera.
If you can equip your front end, the person who's responding to that inquiry, with something to help the caller or the texter or whatever with, right up front, you're sort of easing their concerns and reassuring them that they've come to the right place.
You're demonstrating expertise, exactly. Even though it's not you personally doing so, just having the answers and anticipating the questions will allow them the sense of relief, which was also highlighted in the 2018 report, which is that 51% felt relief as the number one emotion when hiring a lawyer. 17% sensed that client's relief as part of the experience from the lawyer side. So don't discount that importance of relief, not only of having the legal matter solved if that's possible, but also just attended to by a professional who has the expertise they need to help them.
To learn more about how Smith AI can help you deliver that sense of reassurance and relief to your clients, visit smith.ai, that's the website address, to learn more about their services. And the first 30 visitors will get a $150 credit towards setup of their chatbot for your website. That is a free thing that you can set up yourself, but if you want help with it, the first 30 visitors will get that for free. Again, that's smith.ai. Maddie Martin, thanks so much for being with us again.
Thanks, Sam.
My name is Laura Briggs, and for the last 7.5 years, I've been working as a content writer and SEO content strategist for law firms all over the United States and Canada. And now I am excited to be part of the Lawyerist team as the content marketing and outreach manager.
I know. Welcome to the team, Laura.
I'm so excited to join you all.
We are excited to have you. And this is your second week on the job, and we're already putting you on the podcast, which is super fun.
That's right. Out of the frying pan and into the fire. I like it.
I am sure it's not the last time we will have you on the podcast, because one of the reasons we're excited to have you is for your breadth of experience doing some of the things that we need done at our company, but that I'm sure our community will benefit from as well. You have been working for lawyers doing this kinds of stuff for a while now, huh?
Yeah, I've always been what I call legally adjacent. I knew that I didn't want to go to law school necessarily, but I've always loved working in and around the law and learning about it. And so when I started my freelance writing business, I was writing for a lot of different clients, but I kept gravitating back to the attorneys. I understood how they think. I'd worked with a lot of lawyers in college and in graduate school as well. When I started my freelance business, I was in the middle of my PhD in public policy. And so it just made a lot of sense to focus on an area that I knew a lot. And so most of my clients have been small law firms and solo lawyers who needed help with content marketing and didn't have the time or the interest to sort of do that for themselves.
Which is going to be what we're going to talk about today, about like how to work with people to get shit done in your law practice. But I feel like I have to point out that with the addition of you, there's now a majority of Virginia expats on the Lawyerist team. There's 3 of us now because Jennifer is also a Virginia expat, and you and I are both Hokies.
That's right.
So.
It's a small world, but I always see other Hokies everywhere, and so it's very cool that we have that in common.
There's a surprising group of alumni in the Twin Cities, in fact.
Interesting. Yeah. I'll have to check that out.
And quite active. Today we're going to talk about working with independent contractors, how to hire, how to get the most out of it, that kind of stuff. Since you have done a fair amount of that, I'd be curious to know, like, when you're sitting down and having cocktails with a friend and you're like, oh my God, working with lawyers is so what? Like, exciting, pain in the ass? Like, what are some of your reflections on working with lawyers, on what makes it work and what doesn't?
Well, I would say that a lot of people shy away from attorneys and lawyers because there's a perception that they will be difficult to deal with. But I have not found that to be the case. I have found that a lot of attorneys know what they want. Well, no, of course there's some. Yeah, there's some. And it's interesting too, because there's certain states where the lawyers are a little bit more difficult to deal with than others.
Which states?
Oh, I would say New York lawyers are pretty tough, man. They just have a fast pace.
Really?
Yeah, they're tough in what they do, and they talk really quickly, and so you have to follow along with that. But most of the attorneys I've worked with have been very professional, know what they want, and so you have to meet them where they're at too. You know, lawyers have to do certain things on their websites. There's certain things you can't say and you can't do, and not every contractor is going to understand that. So there's a lot of nuance to working with lawyers, and I think that it's something that certain contractors really prefer to specialize in because of that, because they understand that world.
Now, you've hired independent contractors too, right? So you get both sides of this issue.
Yeah, absolutely. I've worked with graphic designers, virtual assistants, editors, proofreaders, researchers. So I've kind of seen some of the common pitfalls, both working for some clients that maybe weren't the strongest at outsourcing to contractors, and then also hiring for my own team to run my business behind the scenes.
Because my perception of the way that many lawyers sometimes approach hiring an independent contractor for marketing in particular is that they just want to buy some SEO, like give me some of that marketing, as if it were a commodity that can just be bought. Have you run into that, or is that not your experience? And if it is, how do you kind of turn that into something more productive?
I think one of the misunderstandings is that you're going to be able to tell exactly what your ROI is going to be. Now, if you're running a pay-per-click ad or something like that, of course, you want to track what your cost per conversion is. And you're hoping that if you invest X dollars, you're going to get so many back in return. With social media, with content marketing, with public relations around law firms, it's very difficult to tell what that is going to be. So sometimes you have to have an educational conversation with the client, being the law firm or the attorney, and saying, you know, my goal is really to help you get more qualified leads that are visiting your website.
You can't necessarily track every single
one.
Yeah,
like I don't know exactly how much your website traffic will go up or how many that will be to start with.
That's a really good point, because like I feel like when the internet marketing boom first happened, many of us who were commenting on it were like, and now you can finally know where all your leads are coming from, right? You can actually like track every phone call, every lead, everything. And you shouldn't hire anybody who says different, which is not true, right? Like anyone who tries to just, pull the wool over your eyes and say, oh, it's all a mystery is probably, selling snake oil. But the reality is a little bit more nuanced. The work that you do on social media is going to probably influence your word of mouth referrals, which is going to get more people Googling you, which is going to, like, it's actually messier, and you can't just track ROI reliably. There's just more going on there.
Absolutely. It's too difficult to say that it's any one thing, but when you have all the right components in place, they can all work together and help with different things. So if you're killing it on social media, but you last updated your blog 6 months ago, that might be all it takes for a potential client to land on your website and go, oh, this law firm might not even be in business anymore, even if you're doing a great job promoting yourself on Facebook. So it's important that all those components do work together and show a consistent picture.
And if you are tracking what you can track, then you can start doing interesting things like not posting on social media for a week and seeing if that does impact your website traffic. And now you can say some intelligent things about how those two things relate to each other.
Absolutely. And I'm a big fan of getting rid of things that you don't need to do and just focusing on the things that make the
Oh, for
most
sure.
impact.
I've probably related this anecdote before, but my uncle is a dentist, who's had a long and very successful career. And he took me aside once and he was talking about like investment opportunities. He's like, look, people are always talking to me about investing in real estate and companies and stuff. He's like, I'm a dentist. I know I know how to be a dentist. I know how to make money being a dentist. I know how to run a dental office. That's where I make my money. It doesn't pay for me to get distracted by all these other things. And I've really tried to take that to heart that there's a lot of value in focus. My Uncle Dan would be pleased to hear me say that, but I don't think he listens to our podcast.
But I think that's the perfect point to make around this idea of you shouldn't be doing everything with your marketing. Even if you like it, and even if you're somewhat good at it, your job is almost always representing clients and converting the prospective clients into those paid clients. And so outsourcing at least part of your marketing does make a lot of sense because it's usually not the best use of time for an attorney, even though it's important.
Thank you for bringing us back. So let's get that back. So when you're thinking about hiring, because a lot of people have been listening to the last few minutes and just going, oh, that all sounds crazy. I don't know how to even start with all that stuff, which is fine. You can hire. But how should you start thinking about that hiring? What do you need to do as step one?
Step one is knowing what you really want, because you're not going to be able to effectively communicate that to any potential contractor or figure out the right avenue for you to go until you know what it is that you really want. So maybe you need someone who's just going to be checking off some administrative tasks that don't require a very high skill level. That's totally different than the law firm that says, hey, I know nothing about SEO. I know nothing about web development. I want someone who's not just going to do the tasks for me, but be more of that strategist who's going to say, this is what I recommend based on your geographic area, your law practices, and your competitors. And so that's the first distinction you have to make. Do I want that strategist or do I want that taskmaster? And then you have to start thinking about the personality a little bit. Do I want someone who's going to be communicating with me regularly, or is this something where I'm just ready to get this off my plate immediately and I'm going to trust the expert to do what they do best? Because those are two different types of contractors and you have to know what's going to work best for you.
I had a conversation this morning with Aaron and Stephanie where they kind of illuminated something about myself to me that I think is relevant here, which is how important it is to know yourself in order to say what you need. And what Aaron had pointed out to me was like, there's high level strategic thinking, like concepts, right? Like, here's what I want, here's how I want to go about it in concept. And then there's low level, like details work, which is, the nitpicky stuff, like grinding out the process and your tasks and getting shit done. And then there's sort of the middle stuff, which is actually like the meat of strategy. It's the nitpicky strategy stuff, like, okay, which pages are we going to build? And what are the keywords that need to go onto those pages? And how are we going to structure those pages for the most benefit? And all that kind of stuff. And I really lose interest in that part. And so if I'm going to hire somebody, I would need to really focus on hiring somebody who fills that void, who is interested in those kinds of things. And I think knowing a bit about yourself in that way is really good too. Where are your skills? Like, are you happy writing copy and you're happy, hiring somebody to do the stuff you need to do and setting the general direction? But like me, you're not good at figuring out which pages and what URLs and what the file names need to be. What are the pages you need to have, that kind of stuff. If you're not interested or good at that stuff, then that's where you need to fill the hole, I think. So
yes. And if you're the heavy-handed person who thinks you need to be involved in every department in the business of running your law firm, just because it's kind of recognizing like, maybe I should partner with the person who has more of the personality that is willing to tell me that, like, hey, you're off on a tangent. I can handle this. Don't worry about it.
Yeah. And I suppose you're understand your own ability to delegate. I think many lawyers are on one end of the spectrum or the other, where it's like, oh, screw it, I'll just do it myself, or do everything for me and I don't really want to manage you. And so understanding where your comfort level with delegation is, because it ought to be in between those two extremes. If you're going to do it successfully, like making sure you have a good attitude about it, or at least a willingness to engage with it, is important too.
Yes, absolutely.
I think we covered your next point about writing a great job description in our recent podcast with Mary Ellen. But say a little bit about that here. Like, what are some of the elements that need to go into your job description in order to get what you want?
Well, some clients do more harm than good in writing way too much information,
Mm,
which is actually going to turn the right freelancers off. Because if your job description is 16 paragraphs long for something that's only going to take a few hours a week,
yeah.
in my mind as a freelancer, I'm saying you're difficult to work with. So I'm going to have to pass on even submitting a proposal or even answering this person's email and deciding to work together. So you want to talk about the core things that the person is going to need to do. And then I always recommend referencing the communication too. Is this something where you need a weekly check in? For example, I never wanted to work with clients that were like, you need to be available on Slack all day to communicate with me or be available on Skype. And it's like, well, if we're working on like 6, 7 different projects, I can't guarantee that I'm going to be available during that time. So you want to think about how can I attract the right person by saying what I do and don't want. I think that's really important because the right people will self-select out and they'll read your job description and say, oh yeah, that's not something I want to deal with. Whereas the right people will apply and then you'll be taking the best of the people who do apply.
Do you have any specific examples of some blunders that you've seen here?
Oh, I just think providing way too much information. And I would never, ever say something like, I've worked with 6 other contractors and it's never worked out because we all see that as contractors and go, oh,
You're a pain in the
yeah,
ass.
there's
Yeah.
one common denominator here and it's you
Yeah.
and you're the problem. So don't mention that. Like, even if you did hire other contractors and it was a mess, maybe it was your fault that you didn't have good instructions or communication, but try to wipe the slate clean and start fresh.
Speaking of
And don't
self-awareness.
yeah, exactly. And just try to make it as clear as possible what the person is going to be doing. So, just like you were talking about striking that middle point, don't have a 2 sentence job description. Hey, I need to hire someone to write blogs for my website. Okay, what practice areas? What state are you in? How long are these? We need more information than that to even give you an appropriate quote.
Mhm.
But don't go too far on the other end of the spectrum either, where you're turning the person off by seeming like you're difficult.
Gotcha. We need to take a quick break to hear from our sponsors, and we come back. We're going to talk about interviewing and work samples and things like that. So we'll be right back. Support for today's episode comes from Back Office Betties, the only virtual receptionist company exclusively dedicated to small law firms that offers unlimited calls. Betty's boutique service boasts customized call handling and virtual assistant services provided by highly trained, relentlessly friendly team members ready to help grow your firm even when you're out of the office. Visit backofficebetties.com/lawyerist to get a free 1-week trial and use the promo code PODCAST to receive $150 off your first month of service. Support for today's episode comes from Rankings.io, a search engine optimization agency working exclusively for personal injury law firms. Simply put, Rankings.io helps personal injury law firms dominate first-page rankings. You'll never have to chase them for an update or hunt them down for an answer. Your clients expect you to be accessible, and Rankings will meet that standard for communication and transparency. You'll have a full team of SEO specialists fighting to put you at the top of Google search results. Personal injury lawyer SEO is all they do, so all their processes, playbooks, and people are completely focused on generating qualified cases for your firm. Best of all, you'll be one of an elite few. Delivering exceptional service and results requires focus, so Rankings.io carefully vets clients before accepting them. It's an ideal fit for growth-oriented personal injury law firms. To see if you're a fit, visit rankings.io/lawyerist to get started. Lawyerist podcast listeners can get 20% off an SEO discovery audit using coupon code Lawyerist. Boost your productivity and save time typing with Text Expander. You can make your own snippets or share and manage snippets for your firm with Text Expander for Teams. You'll reduce errors and increase productivity. Text Expander can save you so much time, it's like getting an extra employee. Text Expander is available for Mac, Windows, iPhone, iPad, and Chrome. Show listeners get 20% off their first year. Visit textexpander.com/podcast to learn more and get your discount. Okay, we're back. So, Laura, we're talking about contractors here, not a full employee hiring process, I think. Should we interview? Should we review work samples? What kind of things should we do to evaluate the applications that we get?
I strongly recommend speaking to the person you're thinking about hiring, even if that is a 5-minute phone call. Because what I have found both in hiring other contractors and having worked with a lot of clients is that phone call will tell you a lot about personality. And that's something a lot of people don't screen for, but they really should. You might assume I'm just hiring a freelancer. It's a couple hours a week, or maybe it's a one-time project to update my website or something. I don't really need the phone call. I'm just going to hire the person who's the best for the job. you need to review their work samples, first of all, and make sure that it speaks well to what you're trying to achieve. And then have that 5-minute phone call just to make sure that you two communicate well. Because if there's communication problems from the jump,
If you can't even manage a 5-minute phone call, then yeah.
exactly. Yeah. If the contractor can't answer basic questions about their process, right? Like a lot of my phone calls would kick off with the client going, well, can you tell me how you pick keywords, right? So, like for an SEO content writer, if I can't answer that question in 30 seconds for a prospective client, that should be their clue to hang up. But I think you can't afford to forget about personality. Do you communicate well with this person? Can you understand each other's instructions? Don't start a relationship when there's lack of clarity or you don't really understand what the person is saying and they don't seem to understand your instructions. That's a big red flag.
Yeah, for sure. When it comes to reviewing work samples, what could that look like?
You want to look for somebody who obviously has the basic skills to do what needs to be done. So if the person says that they're a WordPress web designer, they should have work samples of websites they have built on WordPress, and you'll be able to tell if they're functioning or not. And if you can click around the site and that you're not coming across dead links or flashing bright text or something like that. But I think you want to be looking for something that meets your style and tone. This comes up a lot, especially if you're outsourcing to writing. I worked with a lot of personal injury lawyers. Some of them were very aggressive in their marketing. I will fight as hard as I can for you. Whereas others were more like, we understand this is a difficult time for you in a wrongful death case. And so you want to look for that match of tone and style. Does this person get what you do? And you also want to look for situations where the information might not be accurate or might be too problematic for legal. That's a problem I've seen with a lot of my potential clients is they hired somebody who was cheapest for the job and then learned after the fact that perhaps the statute wasn't quoted properly or they used images that weren't commercially licensed. And so you want to be looking for those little details to make sure this is someone who really understands legal.
Cheapest is not always better. When can you look at somebody and go, oh, I think I can teach them what they need to know to be successful? Is that something you should be doing with independent contractors, or is that more for employees where you can really train and mentor?
I think with employees, it's probably more fitted to that type of a situation. But if you're intending to work with this contractor long term, of course, you want to have that conversation about, hey, I think I can really teach this person something. You want to have that perfect blend of this person has the interest, or perhaps they have the background. They're willing to learn a little bit, but you don't want to blur that line into, they become a total taskmaster and I'm just telling them exactly what they need to do and the way in which they need to do it. But I think there's a nice happy medium there where they can learn some things from you, but you want to be mindful of the fact that a contractor, you are not their only client. So this is definitely not a situation where it's like an employee. When a freelancer is working with multiple clients, you can't really ask things of the freelancer like, hey, can you jump on the phone in 5 minutes? Like you can of an employee. So you have to be mindful of those types of things as well.
Right.
Do I really need to have a weekly training call with this person if I'm one of 6 or 10 clients? Is that really right for me to be asking? If it's right for your long-term project, absolutely discuss those expectations with the freelancer upfront.
But for the most part, a freelancer ought to be somebody that you can hire and then send them off to do their work.
Yes, they should have a core knowledge of the thing that they market themselves as being an expert at. And you should ask them too. One of the questions I used to ask my independent contractors before I hired them, what is your comfort level with this piece of software or this task? Rate yourself on 1 to 5, 5 being I'm amazing, I need no direction whatsoever. And if someone is rating themselves low, that's when you want to consider that in your interview process. Like, is this person so great in other areas that I'm willing to take that step back and train them? Or do I really need someone who already knows this software or this process on day one where I can just pass it off to them? It
sounds like you think an independent contractor should mostly be somebody who can do things for you, not necessarily do things under your supervision.
Yes, and there's, of course, that important legal distinction there. This is one of the things that I've coached so many freelancers about is, watch for those cases when a potential client is treating you like an employee rather than an independent contractor, because that's a very gray area that you don't want to enter into from a legal perspective.
And neither do they.
Nobody wants to enter into that. So just be mindful of that. Like, am I controlling their work environment? Am I providing them with the equipment and telling them when and how the work has to be done? Okay, this is potentially more of an employee situation. So you can still have a freelancer who provides you with strategy and who does sort of those task-based lists for sure, but you just want to be careful about how do you set up that working arrangement? What are the expectations of that freelancer? Are you asking them to be available at specific times every single day? Kind of want to catch yourself on those. Oh,
The more expectations, the closer to an employee that you're treating them.
exactly. And you probably do have employees in your law firm too. And so your natural tendency is to set it up the way you've set up giving instructions and meetings with everybody else. But this person is a little bit different. They're kind of like an outside partner. And so you want to be careful to treat them that way.
I'm sure the employment lawyers listening have all kinds of checklists about like how to make sure you're not treating your contractors like an employee. Some reasonable limitations to me might seem like you don't get to dictate how they organize their day or where they work and things, what equipment, maybe some equipment, but not all of it. You're not going to expect it to provide it for them.
Right.
What are some other things that might be worth observing before you cross that line?
Well, and I think too, it's not just about the legal thing where you don't want to end up in hot water. Freelancers hate being micromanaged for the most part. So the more you can make yourself easier to work with and recognize that this is a client contractor relationship rather than an employer employee one, the easier it is. So I think just being very mindful and respectful of their time, being clear about that at the outset, how do I communicate with this person? Through what mediums do I share information about my company as well, right? Because you want to protect yourself that you're not giving them too much access to something where they are that outside partner, perhaps working on your website. Maybe they do need access to the back end of your website, but how can you protect yourself security wise? And I think a lot of it just comes down to think about the fact that you're not their only client. So if you're making unreasonable requests when there might be 6 or 7 other projects on their plate, you kind of want to walk yourself back and think, okay, how can I be more productive and effective when asking for things and getting things done?
When you look back over your most successful relationships as an independent contractor or as somebody hiring independent contractors, were there like elements to those relationships or things that made them really work well that we haven't already highlighted?
100%. So the easiest one that I feel like everyone can control is pay your contractors on time because contractors hate chasing down money. And even if we do have a contract in place, most freelancers aren't going to normally pursue any type of legal action, but make it easy for them to get paid. So have a system set up, especially if you're working with more than one freelancer. Have it be like, your invoice is due to this email address every other Friday, and I pay twice a month on these days. Make those expectations super clear. You will thank yourself later when you're not getting the emails from all your contractors going, wait, who do I invoice? How much is due? Did you pay that invoice from 3 weeks ago? So make it easy.
I mean, lawyers are essentially independent contractors for their clients. So
exactly.
Think how nice it is for you to get paid on time.
And hint, hint, that's why I love working with lawyers, because 99% of them pay their bills on time because they have to invoice too, and they want to get paid as well. It's another reason to work with attorneys. I think that's a good one. I also think setting up the expectations with the contractor at the beginning, as far as, yes, I want you to do these tasks, but hey, if you notice something in my website, in my marketing materials, something that doesn't work right, something that could be better, feel free to suggest it, because I've discovered things for my clients where they had no idea, and just making that recommendation. One of my clients had 60% of the content on his website was stolen, and I kind of found that by accident doing some research for him. And I said, hey, by the way, this is probably why you're having problems ranking in Google. And he's like, oh, thank you for telling me, right? So sometimes your contractor will have expertise beyond what you're hiring them to do.
That's the whole point of hiring a contractor, right?
Exactly. So be open to that, right? You don't have to take their advice. You don't have to follow through on it, but definitely leave that door open, because they might be able to recommend something to make things even better in the process.
Well, Laura, thank you so much for being with us today, and I guess in perpetuity, potentially. And I suppose the irony of this entire conversation is that you probably will hire independent contractors in the future and do some freelance work yourself, but now you're a full-fledged employee. So welcome to Lawyerist.
All right. Well, thank you. I'm thrilled to be here.
And I guess those listeners who are going to be at LabCon in next month or in March will get to meet you. So that'll be pretty cool.
Yes, I'm very excited to meet everyone.
Thanks for being on the podcast. See you later.
Yep.
Are you interested in implementing the ideas you've heard on today's podcast into your law firm? Could you use a little help? Hey guys, it's Stephanie, the VP of Community Success here at Lawyerist, and I'd love to help you tackle your business or take it to the next level. Head over to go.lawyerist.com/start to sign up for a quick call with me, and let's talk about how Lawyerist can help you create your best law firm.
Make sure to catch next week's episode of the Lawyerist podcast by subscribing to the show in your favorite podcast app. And please leave a rating to help other people find our show. You can find the notes for today's episode on lawyerist.com/podcast.
The Lawyerist podcast is edited by Paul Fisher. The views expressed by the participants are their own and are not endorsed by Legal Talk Network. Nothing said in this podcast is legal advice for you.